What's going on, everyone? It's Blandon here from Go Stadium, and today I want to introduce two very special people to you guys. So Jay Devon, if you guys haven't been to his channel yet, one of my favorite content creators. And the thing about Jay is that he's so hardworking, and if you check out his video, he puts a lot of effort into it. And in the last few months, he has improved massively in terms of his commentary as well as his gameplay. And have you seen his tournament where he went 6-1? That was an amazing tournament in the Mirror Cup. So I definitely encourage that you check out his channel. And today he is going to be running the show, and we've got this coaching program on Go Stadium. And basically, if the students get a sweep, we will feature their video. And today we have Indigo. Without further ado, I'm going to let Jay Devon get into it.
Thank you very much, Blandon, and also thank you to the Go Stadium Elite team for providing me with this opportunity to shoutcast this amazing performance. 5-0 at any kind of tournament is no joke. We are in for a treat. There's going to be some very skilled gameplay, very good examples of matchup mastery, shield conservation, and familiarity with energy requirements for charge moves based on the number of fast moves that have been used. And Indigo is very, very active in the PvP community. He watches, he observes, he absorbs, and he learns. Indigo actually is under the wing and being coached by HouseStark. If you're not familiar with HouseStark, he is by far one of the best of the best. On top of that, Indigo did have a few strategies and or strategic behaviors that he used that he had mentioned to me to bring him victory in this 5-0 Sinister Cup. Number one, Dusclops. He does use Dusclops very well. He said he uses it as a safe switch. I think it goes more in depth and it goes above and beyond that, as we'll see. He did also mention that he tried to use the Piggyback 2.0 and utilizing his matchup mastery and overall PvP and typing knowledge. It gave him an advantage to be very efficient with his energy farming and management. And another strategy that he used is utilizing a double ghost strategy. So with all that being said, let's get started. For Indigo's 5-0 Sinister Cup team composition, we have Alolan, Marowak, Probopass, Dusclops, Poliwrath, Steelix, and then Medicham. And opponent number one for round one, David Gabo. And David, of course, brought a pretty solid team composition as well. For David 6, we have Mawile, Alolan Marowak, Poliwrath, Steelix, Drifblim, and then Medicham. Now, both Indigo and David here have team compositions that punish the opponent for not bringing a confusion user. Poliwrath and Medicham sit really great next to each other on a team of 6, but also in a team of 3. All right, and round one, game one here for Indigo's 5-0. What do we see as opens here? Okay, we see a Ghost versus Ghost. They're both going to be carrying Hex. Now, probably a little known fact is that for both Ominous Wind, which will be carried by Drifblim, and Shadow Punch carried by Dusclops, it's going to take 4 Hexes to get to them. So in terms of an open, it's kind of an even matchup. The advantage that Drifblim could potentially have in this matchup is if it lands an unshielded Shadow Ball. That would be very, very bad news for Dusclops. So I don't think it was the incorrect call for Indigo to have invested his shield in that matchup, because he's going to be carrying the Shadow Punch. Obviously, the Mawile is going to come out to try and take care of business with the Dusclops. Don't shield the Power-Up Punch in that matchup. That makes sense, but unfortunately, you're not able to get off the Fire Punch to deal the super effective to the Mawile. This is a little more ideal for Indigo at this point, right? He comes in with the Poliwrath, which as we can see is carrying Bubble as the fast move, and then Ice Punch as a charge move, and Dynamic Punch also as a charge move. This combination, this move set carried on Poliwrath, we've seen dominate Sinister Cups left and right all over the place. Indigo utilized it very well in this matchup in round one, game one here. I think it's giving him a huge advantage because now he's in a matchup with a Ghost versus a Medicham, which is not ideal at all. And they had no shields left, so the Shadow Ball just, it does work, it deletes. This execution for this first game is almost perfect. It's like a dream. GG's game one, let's go to game two. All right, round one, game two. Indigo basically had a clean sweep for game one. Very, very well played, so David is gonna have to step it up for this tournament. This is still not going to be ideal for David, right? That is a Hex Alolan Marowak that David brought, which is going to charge a little faster than Fire Spin will in some situations. However, it's only going to take 4 Hexes for Dusclops to get to a Shadow Punch, and it's going to take 4 Hexes for Alolan Marowak to reach the Shadow Ball in terms of an open. So Dusclops is going to outspam the Alolan Marowak all day. That was ideal for David at that point to have landed that Shadow Ball. But Indigo is going to come out with the Poliwrath, which is going to farm up a little bit for the next matchup by just using the bubble damage to get rid of it. Out comes this Medicham. Now this could be interesting. I think Indigo just made the right choice by opting for the Ice Punch. I think he's anticipating a Psychic. We do not see his shield. He's going to save the shield for the last matchup. So it'll be interesting to see what David has sitting in the back here for game 2. There should be another Psychic, ideally, if David wants to pick up the pace to try and win for game 2 here. Now, it was really good here from what you can see that Indigo saved this shield, because now his Alola Marowak is actually going to stand a very viable chance against the Steelix in this matchup, right? He has a shield that he could use. He uses the shield, blocks the crunch, going for the fire spins, and they didn't even have to use the other shield. GG's. Well played, Indigo. Now, Indigo is already victorious for round 1, but out of good sportsmanship, it looks like they both opted to go for a round 3. I think David might have wanted a little redemption. I'm not sure. But this is going to be game 3. Let's see who's actually going to win. You know, is it going to be a clean 3-0 sweep we see from Indigo? It's kind of hard to say. You know, David, I think, might be a little rustled up at this point. Looks like he makes kind of a hasty switch. He comes in with the Dripplum versus the Dusclops. And Indigo, in terms of actual ranked tournament play, from what I've witnessed myself, is the best Dusclops user, hands down. He really knows the matchups. He knows when to shield, when not to shield. He plays around with the Dusclops very well. He uses Dusclops to the best of its ability to play around the opponent's team composition, right? He's played around David's team almost perfectly, very, very well. The Poliwrath with the bubble damage is going to be able to get rid of the Dripplum. He's gone for the Ice Punch against the Medicham in this matchup. I think that's the proper thing to do. He only needs 2 more bubbles here to get to another Ice Punch, which is going to be very spammy, right? It's not going to be an ideal amount of damage per Ice Punch against a Medicham. You're not getting stabbed, and it's not super effective either, but it still does damage. Poliwrath is a monster, and this is really, really, really not good for David. Indigo still has this Alola Marowak. He's carrying Fire Spin, and he has saved a shield again. Save your shields, Indigo. Maybe I need to be coached by you, Indigo. You've done this so perfectly. These matches are brilliant so far. GG's, clean 3-0 sweep. Let's go to the next round. All right, and the next opponent we have for Indigo's 5-0 is Cables29. But Cables brought Gardevoir, Alola Marowak, Poliwrath, Steelix, Banette, and then Claydol. Right, and here we are for round 2, game 1. Indigo versus Cables for Indigo's 5-0. Let's go, Indigo. We see that Cables opts to open up with a Banette, which, as you probably know, Banette can carry Thunder, which could be a big problem for Poliwrath, right? It's still going to take the super effective, even though Banette is pretty squishy. It's got utility against Poliwrath in this matchup. It can do some work. So I don't think it was a bad call for Indigo to have used a shield in this matchup. Now, as we've seen from round 1, Indigo is a very smart mid to late game in his matches. He likes to save a shield if he doesn't need to swap, or even potentially, you know, if he needs to shield like we saw with the Psychic, he's just not going to do it. He's going to save his team composition and his Dusclops threat that he has to, you know, potentially be clutch and to take the match. He's very patient in his gameplay, in his decision making, which is, I think, what might have brought him victory in this tournament as a whole. But anyways, this Poliwrath's gotten rolling. It's done some damage. It's even still doing some work against the Dusclops in this matchup. I think Indigo's proper here and still staying in with the Dusclops. There's really no reason to swap at all. You don't want to swap out to the Steelix you have in that team composition and take that extra damage. That'd be unnecessary. That'd be nonsense. In this matchup, the opposing Steelix is going to beat you to that Earthquake, like you saw right there, but Cable Steelix has already taken, you know, a little bit of damage, a considerable amount of damage, so the Earthquake is going to be a little more threatening to the opposing Steelix in this scenario. And what I really like about this point right here is that Steelix is so low on health. This Dusclops is going to wipe it out. It's going to be GG's. Game 1. All right, I hope you like 2s, because here we go with round 2, game 2 for Indigo's 5-0. Up against Cables. Now, he opens up with the Fire Spin Alolan Marowak against the Steelix. Now, Steelix is very threatening to Alolan Marowak with its charge moves, right? The Dragon Tail coming from Steelix is not getting same type attack bonus, and is not dealing super effective to Alolan Marowak. Whereas Alolan Marowak can threaten Steelix in almost every situation. So, you know, it really depends on how the opponent's going to play this matchup. Are they going to shield bait? Are they going to land an Earthquake? Those are some things to consider in the Alola Marowak versus Steelix scenario, which I think Indigo played it very, very well. He opts to shield bait, kind of. You know, he gets it off. It was successful, and he's coming out with the Steelix for this matchup. Now, I think Indigo knows this matchup very well. I think he's had a lot of success with it, because whether that was going to be Shadow Ball or Bone Club at that point, I think Indigo knows it's not going to KO his Steelix. And then he's going to build up enough energy at this point to come in with his Steelix, do the crunch damage against the opposing Steelix, which basically deletes it. This is very well played. It looks like Cables opted to actually bring the Gardevoir, but to have it sit in the back, which, you know, I don't necessarily think is a questionable play. I think Cables was trying to get a feel for Indigo's playstyle and his team composition, and what decisions he's going to be making throughout the matches. The Shadow Ball lands up against the Alola Marowak. It's going to deal as super effective, but then the Dusclops. Indigo, you have mastered Dusclops. And yet again, Indigo has already seized victory for this round. However, out of good sportsmanship, they're opting to go for round 3. Now, obviously, Cables swaps out of the Steelix versus Poliwrath scenario. That's not good news. He swaps into his Banette, which was, you know, kind of an interesting play. Indigo comes in with his Dusclops. He utilizes this Dusclops so well. The main thing it's going to have to be concerned about from the Banette obviously would be a Shadow Ball, so use the shield if you want to reserve your Dusclops. But more importantly, the Shadow Claw as a fast move combined with Banette's attack stat is very, very threatening. You know, against anything it'll deal super effective to. It's very threatening, just like Haunter, right? It's basically a budget Haunter for those who don't have any legacies. But at this point, you know, Indigo's already seized a very clear, definitive advantage. Categorically, I think he wins. He basically has swept and done a lot of good work in round 2. I think what we've witnessed so far from Indigo is, number 1, patience. Number 2, from the looks of things, he is counting his fast moves. So he's predicting when things, you know, could potentially be shield bait or when it's not, based on what we have seen from his shield usage. But more importantly, you know, rather than just being patient and counting fast moves, Indigo's been very, very good at winning the lead. And if he does not win the lead, he's very good at recovering from it, which I think in terms of the matchups that we've seen so far in these battles, it's because he utilizes Dusclops very well in his team composition. We haven't seen him use Medicham or Probopass. We haven't seen anything else like that. GG's. At this point, you've seen that Indigo is very masterful and very skilled at using a double ghost team of 3, you know, including the Poliwrath. Between the Dusclops and the Alolan Marowak, those have been very, very clutch in getting Indigo victories. He's used them very, very well, and he's also not afraid to use Steelix. And here we go for our next opponent, Zatranoid. Zatranoid brought Mawile, Alola Marowak, Poliwrath, Steelix, Ferrothorn, and then Claydol. All right, round 3, game 1 here for Indigo's 5-0. We see Zatranoid open up with the Claydol, which, you know, given the potential fire threat from the Alolan Marowak and the Dusclops, I think that was the right choice for the most part for Zatranoid to make. Indigo read that though. He opens with the Steelix, which is not going to be an ideal scenario for Claydol. The main thing obviously here that Steelix is going to have to worry about is the Earth Power and or an Earthquake potentially landing from the Claydol. Steelix is not going to like that, not at all. At this point, you know, it's kind of an interesting matchup. I don't think it's a matchup too many people might be familiar with. If you're going to a tournament, it's a matchup you definitely should be familiar with, is Steelix versus Claydol. It could go either way, literally just depending on what moves you had and who shields and when, essentially. Now, the first thing to note, obviously, that was D-Punch, but that Poliwrath has Mud Shot, okay? So it's going to be very, very spammy, which I think is why Indigo actually opted to bring in the Medicham now, because he's able to kind of mellow down, you know, the spammy dynamic punch threat that can come out from that Poliwrath. He's going to get powered up a little bit, get ready for the next Pokemon. I think he's going to try and just go for a Psychic. It actually looks like they opt to bring out the Claydol. Essentially, they're going to be sacrificing their Claydol in this matchup and leave just one Pokemon left with one shield, which they actually brought the Ferrothorn. Okay, so this Fire Punch, you know, just like we mentioned earlier, the Fire Punch threat against the Ferrothorn, it's going to be dealing 256% damage from Fire Punch. Even without the same type attack bonus on the Dusclops, that Fire Punch is just going to melt, completely melt Ferrothorn in this matchup. He goes for a Shadow Punch. I'm not sure exactly why he went for that. I think he should have just ended it. Ferrothorn, is able to get rid of the Dusclops, but then the Medicham ends it. GG's game 1. Let's go to game 2. Round 3, game 2. We see yet again Indigo has put on the massive pressure with his masterful gameplay for this Sinister Cup. He's played so well. He's utilized opposing teams' weaknesses very well. He's played very patiently. He has reserved shields, and he loves using the Dusclops. He loves using this Alola Marowak as well. This matchup is pretty considerable, right? Because the crunch is still going to be very threatening to Alola Marowak, obviously being super effective, but Alola Marowak's going to be carrying Fire Spin, which against the Steel, as you can see, is just going to be doing a consistent, super effective damage. It can, slowly melt down the Steelix. Even though Steelix is very tanky, it's not ideal for Steelix. So the Steelix goes down. We see Shadow Ball, which unfortunately looks like does not land against the Poliwrath in this matchup. Now, this is something to consider as well. I mean, the Hydro Pump, okay, to note that they have Hydro Pump, but also to note that since it is a Mudshot Poliwrath, it's not going to deal that extra heavy, powered up bubble damage. That's something that they sacrifice with using a Legacy Poliwrath for the Sinister Cup, which I think is going to give more wiggle room and more leeway for Indigo to take advantage of. I'd be really shocked if Indigo does not win round 2 and go still undefeated for the Sinister Cup. This gameplay is very impressive, very beautiful, very well done. Very well done, okay? So the Claydol uses its energy when that Dusclops has almost nothing left. Medicham's going to come back in with the Psychic, good to go against the Poliwrath. Shields down, Poliwrath down. GG's Indigo! This is respectable, good sportsmanship yet again. For the 3rd time in a row, Indigo, for this 5-0, has gone 2-0 against his opponents, and they opt to go for a game 3. They open up with the Mawile. Zatronoid that very much, loses the lead there. That's not going to be ideal at all for the Mawile. You're going to lose that opportunity that you have to counter the Ghosts, and this Medicham's going to get rolling, especially against the Poliwrath in this matchup. Medicham likes this. Poliwrath does not. Mawile does not. It's not good news at all. I think the reason Indigo opted to use Medicham quite often in this round 3 against Zatronoid is the lack of double Ghost strategy due to Zatronoid's team composition, right? The only Ghost that Zatronoid brought was Alola Marowak, which gives Medicham the room that it needs to be Medicham, to get the counter damage in, do the power-up punch, go for the clutch Psychic, which we saw win round 2 for Indigo. Again, he has the shield, he has this Dusclops. This is just so well, beautifully played, beautifully timed in terms of shielding. We've seen very patient gameplay, not very many switches from Indigo, right? He's putting the pressure on his opponents because we've seen a lot of switching from his opponents. He plays his team almost perfectly. It's beautiful, very beautiful gameplay. Mawile is going to be doing the quick, super effective bite damage against the Alola Marowak, but it has Fire Spin. GG's Indigo! And for the next opponent here, I'm really not sure if this first letter or this first character is an I or if it is an L. To avoid any confusion, we're just going to say Martinez. Now Martinez, I think, has a very crowd-pleasing team composition. I say that because they brought the Lugia, okay? Lugia, Drifblim, Steelix, Poliwrath, Alolan Marowak, and then Medicham. At this point in the tournament for Indigo, the Lugia threat is something new. It's something that Indigo has not faced at this point. I do think that Indigo's not going to be too worried about it. Indigo has plenty that can, deal with the Lugia threat. And here we go, Indigo. Round 4 for Indigo's 5-0. We saw this in round 1, game 1. The Drifblim versus the Dusclops for the Open. It's very important, especially in this matchup, to be able to count how many hexes that Drifblim's got in. This is an ominous wind at this point. We know that it's not going to be a Shadow Ball. They both almost got it off at the same time, right? So that's an advantage I think Indigo has at this point, is he's predicted the ominous wind. He let it land. I think, okay, he uses a shield here, which I don't think is questionable because now he has another Shadow Punch good to go. and I would be very, very surprised if we saw another shield used by Martinez to protect that Drifblim. And being the spam master for Sinister Cup that Dusclops is, he's able to get off another Shadow Punch, which could potentially be game-changing against the Poliwrath in this matchup, especially since we saw Indigo. It looks like he did bring that Probopass. I think he's potentially scared of the Lugia threat, but he is carrying the Thunderbolt for this Poliwrath, which can still deal super effective. You don't want to use the Rock Slide. That'll be not very effective. Poliwrath is part fighting typing. Obviously, we're going to see a shield from the Thunderbolt. I think that was the right choice. The Rock Slide at this point, though, should be in KO range, so the Poliwrath's going to be gonzo. It's not going to reach another Hydro Pump. And oh, it looks here like Indigo might be taking his first L for this Sinister Cup. I mean, we know he ends up going 5-0 for this tournament. So Martinez is going to take game 1. Indigo is going to have to switch it up, be a little less scared of the Lugia threat. I'm very interested to see. Okay, so for game 2 here, we see the same thing. We see a Drifblim versus a Dusclops open. Indigo knows that Drifblim is going to need one more Hex to be able to get to a Shadow Ball. So he's not going to be shielding the Ominous Wind. Let's pray that Drifblim does not get a boost from the Ominous Wind. Thankfully, it does not. So we're able to get to another Shadow Punch, which we don't see any shields from Martinez in that opening matchup, which is, I don't want to say questionable, but I feel like it definitely might put Martinez at a disadvantage here for game 2 up against Indigo. Indigo is very patient in his gameplay. He makes decisions not based on, being hasty or making too many hasty switches. He's very familiar with his matchups. He's prepared for the Poliwrath with his team composition because he's brought this Medicham. He goes for a bait there. I think that bait was a little bit preemptive because he didn't have the Psychic good to go at that point. But nonetheless, since he used the power-up punch, that Poliwrath is just going to be rolled away in the wind because the counter damage is still very considerable coming from the Medicham. So even if it was not legitimate shield bait, I think that was the proper play. It was a very smart play. He's going for the power-up punches still against the Steelix. He's going to get the damage rolling, and he's going to take a clean game 2 from the looks of things. GG's. And for the cake here between Martinez and Indigo, for Indigo's 5-0, we see the same thing again. Ghost and Ghost open up. Hex versus Hex. What really Martinez had to do in this matchup to make any kind of difference against Indigo, given Indigo's knowledge and that he's demonstrated he can play with patience. You gotta go for a legitimate Shadow Ball bait. Wait for another Hex to go through before you use any kind of charge move. I think that's the only thing that's going to even begin to shake Indigo. That's the only thing that would begin to make Indigo question whether he's going to use a shield or not. But Indigo's played perfectly. Do we see a Ghost come out? This is beautiful. This is perfect. Gonna get the super effective Shadow Punch to land against the opposing Alola Marowak. You're gonna bring in the Probopass. If they get to a Rock Slide and that Rock Slide lands, being super effective against Alola Marowak's Fire part Fire typing, that's super, super clutch. And they swap out, obviously. I think they knew that, so they're going in for the Steelix, but then Indigo comes in with the Medicham. Oh, this is perfectly played. Even though it gets off an Earthquake, it's not going to deal too much damage. Medicham can tank an Earthquake, and it's just going to get the power-up punches off. It's going to do the massive counter damage. Back in comes the Alola Marowak, which is going to be able to delete the Medicham, but this Rock Slide, look at that. Wow. GG's Indigo! Now up through round 4, Indigo has played masterfully. He's had great self-composure. He's played with amazing patience. He's made the right decisions. I think he was a little shook in terms of his team composition against the Lugia threat we saw previously in round 4. But again, given how he's very good at reserving shields and utilizing ghost Pokemon such as Alola Marowak and Dusclops, we've still seen 3 very important things that have been very useful to Indigo. His knowledge of specific matchups, his knowledge about fast moves and energy requirements, since we did not see any kind of legitimate shield baiting from the Drifblim. That did him a lot of favors. And I think just his composure and his patience overall. We haven't seen really any hasty or questionable plays from Indigo. I think Indigo's done a lot of practice for this tournament. He's very, very prepared. But obviously for round 5, the opponent is also performing well and is considerably just as prepared. Now the last opponent for Indigo's 5-0 here is Blast015. I'm just going to say Blast. And I feel like Indigo is going to be a little more comfortable against Blast's team. And the reason I say that is because Blast did not bring any Alolan Marowak. I mean, you have the Medicham, Dusclops, Poliwrath, Steelix, Claydol, and then the Mawile. The only ghost that Blast brought is Dusclops. But as we saw previously for Indigo, Indigo knows how to take advantage of a team that does not have a potential double ghost threat. All right, getting into the final round, round 5 for Indigo's 5-0 against Blast015. Not super ideal for Indigo. Remember, his Alolan Marowak is carrying Fire Spin, not Hex, and it's also going to be threatened by the ground type charge move coverage coming from the Claydol. So he swaps in a safe swap is what Dusclops is. He swaps into Dusclops against the Medicham, which, you know, depending on shield usage, if the Medicham successfully lands a Psychic or does not, that could kind of weigh on the rest of this match. Okay, so we see the Psychic successfully land here against Indigo's Dusclops. Obviously, the Hex and the Shadow Punch will still be dealing the consistent super effective against Medicham, so that's considerable. And also to note, Indigo at this point for game 1 still has the clear shield advantage. It's 2-1. Now, this is a very rough position for Indigo to be in. He has some decisions to make. You can see he's not being too hasty. No matter what he's going to switch into, the Dusclops is going to be very threatening and dealing super effective damage with the spammy Hex and Shadow Punch combo. He knows how tanky Medicham is. I think this is what he's waiting for. He's waiting for Blast to make a switch because he took the damage, which puts Medicham with the Claydol remaining in kind of a rough position, and he comes back in with the Alolan Marowak, utilizing the fact that he still has a shield advantage, but not anymore, but he had a shield advantage. He's going for the Bone Club, which was successful bait, straight up just bait. It was perfect, actually, at this point in the battle. This is handed Indigo, I believe, the clear advantage at this point. The Shadow Punch is going to land successfully against the Alolan Marowak. Does not KO, but he does a quick swap into the Medicham, which only needed one more counter for the Psychic, and that's GG's game 1. Let's go to game 2. Again, the final round, round 5 for Indigo's 5-0 against Blast015 for game 2. The same thing. We see the Claydol versus the Alolan Marowak for the open. Indigo swaps out again into the Dusclops. Considerably can be a safe swap, right? I don't think that can be said enough. But it looks like Blast015 opted to actually bring the Steelix this time. Maybe particularly for this matchup. It's really hard to say for sure. I think the Mawile would have been more threatening. Conservatively, I say it conservatively because of the Fire Punch threat that Dusclops still has against both of them as coverage moves, right? That's why Dusclops, I think, potentially could be the definitive Pokemon of the Sinister Cup. Anyways, Blast015, we see yet again has reserved his Dusclops at this point, and he's kind of used that as an advantage. His gameplay has reserved his shields and also kind of kept Dusclops a little hidden until he's able to mellow down the Dusclops threat from Indigo. So again, Indigo, has some decisions to make. We have a 1 shield versus 1 shield scenario. Comes back in again with the Medicham just like he did before. At this point, with how low the health is on the Dusclops, I don't think it would be too hasty to try and go for a power-up punch, but yet again, we see that Blast ends up deciding to swap in to the Claydol from that matchup. This might play out exactly the same as round 1 did. We actually do see the successful shield for the Shadow Ball on the Claydol. So Claydol is going to be able to survive. It's going to take it. It's going to get the Earth Power off, which is going to be able to get rid of the threat at this point. This might actually end up legitimately going to game 3 rather than just good sportsmanship. Maybe? Yeah. This is going to game 3, 100%. Well played. Blast played that very well, basically the same way as the previous round. Let's go to the final. In the final of the final, game 3 for round 5, Indigo versus Blast015 here for Indigo's 5-0. Now, I think Indigo at this point is going to have to make some different, possibly risky plays to gain victory against Blast. Blast did something a little different though. He opened up with the Steelix, so potentially, you know, this matchup could go either way. It just depends on who shield baits, who shields, who doesn't shield, who's going to stay in the matchup, who's going to be more efficient, who's going to be quicker, who's going to be smarter. That's really what this kind of matchup comes down to. And it looks like Indigo has done something very different. He chooses not to play as conservatively. He used both shields in that matchup, knowing very well that the Fire Spin is going to do consistent, quick, and heavy damage against Steelix. And he saved energy as well. Now he's able to do a considerable amount of damage against the Dusclops at this point. He's already mellowed down the Dusclops threat because he chose to double shield for the first matchup. And Blast makes kind of a hasty decision at that point, and Indigo successfully lands a Shadow Ball against the Claydol, dealing the super effective. That's going to be very, very GG's at this point. Indigo has had masterful gameplay. He's made the right decisions. He's played very smart. Mostly he's played, very conservatively with his shields, but it brought him victory. GG's. I think that performance for Indigo's 5-0 was a great and a huge testament of how valuable, not only PvP coaching can be, especially coming from HouseStark, but more importantly, to be patient, to play conservatively with your shields. Don't be afraid to take a hit, know your matchups, and also get familiar with counting fast moves and knowing different energy requirements for meta Pokemon. So you can know, like Indigo, if a charge move is going to be legitimate shield bait or not. On top of all that, we do know that Indigo's team composition was very well thought out and also very well planned. He used every single one of his picks throughout this 5-round tournament, and he brought them in each battle for a specific reason. Just like when we saw the Probo Pass came out, it came out because of the Lugia threat. So the shoutcasting over Indigo's 5-0 has been very insightful. I have learned a lot just from watching this gameplay. Hopefully you have as well. If you did learn something new, please remember to leave a like. It helps a lot. Remember also to leave, a congratulations to Indigo for his 5-0 victory in this Sinister Cup CUERNAVACA. So GG's to Indigo, GG's to the battles, and GG's to the shoutcasting video, because it is over. If you did enjoy, subscribe if you feel the GO Stadium vibe, and power up punch the notification bell for all that PvP content. That is it for this video. We will see you in the next one. Battlers, take it one battle at a time, and have a good freaking day.